Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is? Time for another client lesson update. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Keep the likes higher than the dislikes. It would be greatly appreciated. But in keeping with this series, and I think this is going to be a very long-term series because my client base just slowly grows over time. And I learn a lot of valuable lessons that can be applied to this channel, things that can help a lot of you, things that you guys will frequently deal with yourselves, because a lot of my people out there want to be personal trainers. They want to be coaches, things like that. I've noticed I have a lot of people here who, when in the comments, are in school for it right now. They're taking some sort of exercise science at university. It might be what their major is in. So you guys are going to coach people eventually. And these lessons are valuable. And at this time, I have over a dozen full-time clients. So I learned some valuable things with different individuals. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when it comes to people who, before you started coaching them or before they started lifting, because a lot of times their lifting hasn't been that phenomenal yet, that there's a massive difference between people who start skinny and people who start overweight, like fat people. And one of the biggest ones is that people who are skinny, number one, have no glutes, no glute and hip strength. They never have any. It is usually the biggest, most massive weak point that they have. Okay, and I also have a couple of people who have a history of eating disorders, who have been very underweight, anorexia, bulimia. All right, I have multiples of those at this point who are trying to gain muscle, gain strength in a healthy way. And these are the common themes. And you see a very, very large amount of overlap between what you see with them and guys who are just generally really skinny who need to bulk up. You see the same problems, and they're very, very, very different from people who started fat. People who were fat when they started are fat for any significant period of time. And when I say fat, I'm going to say more than 25 pounds overweight. More than 25 pounds overweight for longer than a year. Fat people have good stability. Fat people have glutes, fat people have hips. Now, this is where people come up with stupid ideas like whatever they call them, those somotypes. It's not actually real. That is make-believe. Okay, the somotype is purely lifestyle induced. It is not genetic. It's not your structure. That's why they've now created like 37 subtypes. Yeah, because it's not real. Okay, but it's because people who walk around heavier get hurt easy if they don't learn to control themselves, right? Fat people don't flop themselves on the ground. And we'll get to this of how this affects lifting. Fat people don't just flop themselves around, do they? Because they hurt themselves, they break stuff. They have to slowly get up off the toilet. They have to slowly get up and down out of chairs when they sit down. They have to control themselves so that they don't hurt themselves or break things. What happens? They have a lot of glute, they have a lot of hip, just from carrying the extra body weight around. They have strong cores, they have strong abs, stronger lower backs relative to skinny people. Now, we also know that being overweight makes you gain muscle. That is an undeniable fact. A person who stands around eating and gaining body fat who doesn't work out will have way more muscle than a person who's skinny. That is a biological and medical fact. A lot of that muscle does tend to be in areas that help them support the extra body weight. Because you're going to gain muscle anyway. It's going to happen. And your body tends to bias it in those because they're getting resistance training of some type. And these people are used to having to control their bodies. Okay, when you're carrying 30 extra pounds of fat, 40 extra pounds of fat, you have to learn to control when you do stuff. Skinny guys have never experienced this. Skinny guys flop down. Right? Guy who's 15 pounds or 20 pounds underweight flops down when he sits down. He flops down when he lays onto the bed, onto the couch. Right? They just flop around. All loose, no control. And they don't have usually control of their bodies unless they played sports. Conversely, they also don't have things like strong cores. They have weak hips. They have underdeveloped glutes. And if you notice when you take the skinny guy, and this is one of the things that I've noticed you've got to work with when you work with them. Skinny guys, when they try to lift weights, and this is, again, we can poke a little fun at this. You guys ever watch a newborn calf or a newborn cow, like the baby the first day it's born flopping around on the ground? They can barely stand and they're all shaking and moving around all crazy. That's what a skinny guy looks like lifting. And it's because they don't have motor control. They're not used to controlling themselves sitting up and standing down, because when they sit down, they just flop. Watch any skinny teenager. They just flop down. Watch a fat person have to sit down. See the difference? Carries over when you put them under a barbell. Skinny guys, when they go to deadlift, you have to teach them how to actually deadlift. You have to teach them how to squat. Because if they box squat, they just plop onto the box, right? Or you put them into a squat, they just drop. And they'll drop ass to grass or whatever, and then stand up, and they'll be shift to the side. They'll flop up like that little baby calf. When they do a deadlift of any type, I don't care if it's sumo, conventional, they'll go to pull the bar. And when they go to deadlift, instead of just using their hips and hip hinging up, right? Should be one fluid movement. Their butt shoots way up in the air, and then they pull up and they shimmy and shake on the way up. And it just looks like someone with a palsy almost when they try to deadlift. And this could be 6 months into lifting. And my skinny clients know exactly, you guys are knowing, this is what I visualize. Sorry, guys. This is what I visualize when I watch you guys deadlift. This is what I see. Every one of you whose butts shoot up in the air. So what you have to do with the skinny guy, how do we resolve this? What does this mean? Number one, they have to have extra glute work. Every single skinny guy has to have glute work because their glutes are years behind, lagging behind the guy who carried extra body weight. They have never had to develop glute strength to stand up. They have never had to develop glute strength to walk around because they don't carry extra body weight that they have to support. And they don't control themselves every time they stand up and sit down. They just flop because nothing breaks. Right? When you weigh 140 pounds, nothing breaks when you sit down. You've never broken a chair. You've never broken your furniture by sitting down. It's completely outside of their conceptualization. They can't even comprehend the idea. You're telling me if I sit down that I could break stuff? Fat people know this. Fat people break chairs. They know. They hurt themselves. You can't just plop onto the toilet. You can't just plop into a chair. You've got to control yourself. It's like a controlled box squat, right? They have to balance themselves to sit down. Skinny guys just flop. So they've never developed any of these muscles even doing day-to-day stuff. And they don't have any body weight to deal with anyways. So there would have been no resistance even if they did bother to control it. Other person's got to control 50 more pounds in them every single time that they stand up or sit down in a chair, on the couch, on the toilet. That adds up over the years. Okay, they don't have any of those muscles. You have to build their glutes and hips directly, immediately from day one. They tend to have weak cores by that same token because building body fat builds your core up. Right? Fat people have strong cores usually compared to the skinny guy, not compared to someone who lifts. You've got to build all that stuff for them. They don't have it. They have weak lower backs. They have weak glutes, weak hips. And of course, again, weak glutes means lower back gets hurt easier. The whole posterior chain is weak because they've never had to control their body. They also have no motor control because they've never carried muscle mass to build tendons, ligaments. They've never had to control things because they just flop anyways. They have to have more dead stop training. Okay. You have to have more dead stop training. And I wish, honestly, most of all want to bench press. I'd rather put all my skinny guys on a floor press. But they would hurt themselves. And that's the other thing you have to think about, too. It's already hard enough. You've got to teach them how to box squat. They need to learn how to box squat. I'll learn to do glute bridges from the floor. You can't teach a skinny guy, though, starting out, even how to floor press. You know why? They'll get hurt. Because when they flop down, they can at least hit their chest with the barbell, pause, and then drive up. They don't have any eccentric control as a general rule. The skinny guy, until you make them develop it, they have no eccentric control of a weight. It's like almost like watching children who haven't reached 10 or stage 4. So you have to teach them control and dead stop training. And like I said, I'd love that if I get them on a floor press, they would probably hurt themselves. Even the guys who are benching 185 for reps, they still don't have eccentric control. So if they try to do a floor press, they would probably bust their elbows and have to go get stitches because they'd hit the floor too hard. Which, yeah, you get hurt easy on the floor press if you hit the floor hard. So you've got to teach them how to control eccentric reps. You have to teach them how to train from a dead stop. A lot of times we've got to do special stuff with them to even teach them how to do a deadlift. What does that mean? Sometimes you have to have them deadlift from a box. A lot of skinny guys, because they can't deadlift without their hips and butt shooting 3 feet up in the air before they pull the weight off the floor, they're like this and the butt just shoots up like higher than their head and then they pull. right? You guys know what I'm talking about. That's how skinny guy deadlifts before they've been taught. A lot of times you have to get them to deadlift off of a box so that they learn to stand up, like especially a sumo, because they'll just stiff leg it. You might have to have them go to a box or a bench and then box squat it up while holding it in their hands like a deadlift. So they can squat down, sumo, grab it, sit onto the box, and then stand up. And even then, their tendency will be to lift the butt 8 inches off the box before they break the weight off the floor. They have no control. They have no control of their movements, and you have to build that up with the skinny guy. And that's one of the biggest differences I see with them. They have no ability to control the weight eccentrically. They flop and shift. No stability. So you have to build stability in them. And a lot of that comes down to things like hips, glutes, core, because they don't have those things. And therefore, that makes them more injury prone. Again, if you don't have glutes, if you have zero glutes, what do you think happens as soon as you start deadlifting? Risk of low back injury. Fat people don't have this problem. They have their own set of issues to deal with. But it's an interesting difference. It's an interesting difference when you watch the way they do stuff. And it has to do with what your lifestyle has done up until that point. Sometimes you're offsetting 3, 4, 5, 6 years of lifestyle and how that carries over to muscular development, how that carries over to the weight room. Because it's more than just moving weights. It's how you move the weights. It's how you move the weights. Skinny guys have to be taught control. We can't go straight into teaching skinny guys to be explosive because they'll hurt themselves. They have to be taught how to control the weight. You have to build support musculature because, again, because they've been underweight, they haven't overfed to just build muscles. They're not carrying extra body weight in which they need to support. They're carrying less body weight than average for a long period of time. All of their support musculature through the body that creates stability is smaller, weaker, and less developed. And you have to put extra care and time into building those things up for them. Okay? And that's something that I've observed quite a bit. And again, it's interesting to note, but it's something I've seen pretty consistently in clients. And for anyone who has had an eating disorder and been even more underweight, it tends to be more pronounced. It tends to be more pronounced. And that makes sense because it's one thing for a person to be at their natural weight and just be underweight. It's another thing when they've actively done it and they've caused muscle atrophy of all of that support musculature, right? Because it atrophies. And it can also create weak connective tissue, everything else, and it makes them just kind of flop around. They're like a limp fish flopping around when they try to lift weights. And you have to teach them to build stability. We have to build it through muscle. We have to build it through connective tissue. And we have to build it through motor unit control. But that's usually the highest priority for these guys, for me. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.